Sorry, I just wanted to check because I know you're a big Luka fan and Dallas didn't make it into title contenders, and I wanted to see if you were okay with that.
Luka is a title contender, and that was very disrespectful. And I am an idiot for not calling you out.
PodSham Pod.
Welcome back to the PodSham Pod. Max has a real job. Somehow he's less busy than I am. Therefore, he's kind of carrying the weight right now, putting the PodSham Pod on his shoulders. Today, we're going to work on a segment called Swinging Party, where Max has surveyed the league for the teams that he thinks he can call legitimate title contenders. And he's going to throw some names at me, names of guys that he thinks are going to be the swing guy on their team this year that'll make the difference between title contention and sort of, I guess, middling playoff status. Max, how are you?
I am good. Ready to dive into some of these swingers. And yeah, I think there's a lot of very interesting teams in the league. It's competitive balance wise, probably the most balanced I can remember it. And sort of in the depths of summer lack of content, I feel like this was a good exercise to kind of get our minds geared towards next season a little bit and start looking ahead to what that's going to bring.
Yeah, man. I think idle hands are the devil's playthings. Twitter wants me to believe that Jaylen McDaniels is a future super duper star, and I'm kind of buying it because I've seen some insane clips of his handle. Starting to think he's underrated after that Rudy Gobert trade talk. Precious Achiuwa, I think I literally have him in my top 20 just from losing my mind on the internet the last few weeks. So let's get back to real things, players that have established themselves or we think might over the course of the next year for the teams that are in the mix. So, yeah. All right, how do you want to do this?
Yeah, well, I guess this is kind of the official start of our gradual 2023 season preview. But we'll have some more stuff rolling out between top players list that I'm working on and surely some things looking ahead to predictions for next year. But just starting with this, I can go team by team through who I think actually has a chance to win the championship next year and identify the one player from each of those that I think has the biggest ceiling basement in terms of if they hit their ceiling, this team's a legit title contender and perhaps even a favorite. And if they hit a very realistic basement, then this team may just fizzle out as like a first round exit or a second round team. So I can just go one by one and get your reactions. And also if you think these teams are worthy title contenders or not. Sound good?
Yeah. So I think you said you have 8 teams, right?
I have 8 and then 2 maybes. So 10 total. Okay.
All Max said before this was that he had more than 25% of the league circled. So I guessed he meant 8 by that. I don't know how the hell he got to 10 or 8.2. But yeah. All right. Start with the 2 maybes.
The 2 maybes. So I'm going to start with Memphis, who I think is a maybe. They were a 2 seed this year. They kind of started their offseason on a bad foot, no pun intended, because Jaren Jackson had I believe a stress fracture in his foot and is probably not going to be ready for the beginning of training camp, most likely probably not till around Christmas if they play it conservatively with him as they have in the past. And he is my ceiling basement player for them. I think the only way that they are a title contender next year, because even though they were a 2 seed this year, I think with the injuries that were in the West and some of the contenders that are coming back fully loaded, I just don't see that same path to a top 2 seed that they had last year. So if Jaren Jackson comes back and reaches kind of an all-star caliber that he's displayed in the past, where he's already a defensive player of the year level defender when he's on the court, and then offensively he shows flashes as a shooter and a finisher, if he can combine that all into like a true all-star package, I think that is their path to being a true contender next year. And if he doesn't, if the sort of foot injury lingers, I could see them being a first round exit team, or honestly, with how strong the West is, if he's out for a really long time, I could see them being a play-in team. So I think he really holds the key to this next season for them. Do you think they're a legitimate title contender, or is maybe the right place for them, or is that even too strong?
I think they're right where they belong, but it's a testament to how stacked the league is right now that they're a maybe because they're incredibly talented. And I didn't expect them to be in the maybe category. I expected them to be top 8, and then I thought about it for a second once you started and started counting off some teams, and it made sense. I agree with you. Jaren is the biggest ceiling floor guy for them. At the same time, because they're so young, like I can think of 4 guys on this team that I might call swing guys. You know, Bane was hampered by injury in the Warriors series, and I feel like we still haven't seen his playoff ceiling, even though I look back at his playoff numbers and they're actually pretty good. I think in that Golden State series, he averaged like 14 and a half on efficient shooting, even though it seemed like he was playing on one leg. Obviously, Ja is a swing guy in the sense that like we just need to see if his frenetic style of play can last several playoff series. Or is that going to become a thing with him that he's one of the best players in the league, but he's landing hard and by game 10 of the playoffs, his body just can't handle that workload because he weighs 170 pounds. This team is just full of talented youngsters that can look like all NBA players on their night. And so for that reason, yeah, Jaren definitely the biggest swing guy because you could tell me he's a Hall of Famer, and I'd say, okay, like there's a path to get there as like the second best player in a Memphis team that wins a title at some point. You could also tell me that we look back on him and sort of like the man, that guy was so talented, like prototype, could shoot threes, elite rim protector, could slide on defense, but just never quite put it together, was injured at the wrong times. So yeah, the few
Yeah.
it does seem like we got Desmond Bain, we got Zaire Williams, we got these guys that like seem like they have a lot more to give, but Jaren is gonna be sort of make or break this short, medium, long-term future for Memphis.
Yeah, he sort of falls into the category that a lot of or a few other young players in the league fall into, where his specifically his development and trajectory and health over the next few years is going to determine almost directly the overall trajectory of the team based on what you expect to get from everyone else. Like, I feel like you kind of know what you're going to get from Ja over the
Yeah.
next 5 years, and you kind of know what you're going to get from Bane, although maybe he even continues to improve. But even if he's just what he was last year and sort of marginal improvements on that, you know what that is a very solid player. Jaren's the guy who has that legit all-star upside. And I think any universe where next year they're in contention for the title has to involve him achieving that all like legit all-star conversation and being like really in the conversation as like a top 30 player in the NBA, which right now he's probably closer to around a top 50 player. And it really depends more on his health. And he still also struggles with fouls. So those are all things that he has to try to, I mean, just stay on the court. Because when he's on the court, his impact is particularly on defense is really strong.
Yeah. And I feel like the next step for him too is becoming a 10 rebound guy. Like he has the length and the athleticism. And I think the desire, he's really physical, but he still hasn't eclipsed 6 rebounds per game in any season in his career. Obviously, Steven Adams was snatching a lot of those boards last year. That was by design, but yeah, there are some levels for Jaren to hit, and he clearly has the talent to do it. All right, who's the other maybe?
The other maybe is Miami, which might be insulting to Miami. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm insulted on behalf of Miami because I picked them to make the finals this last year and they almost made me look really smart.
Yeah. Unfortunately for them, I think they were the number one seed, and the 3 teams behind them all got a lot better this offseason. And they lost PJ Tucker, who was a big part of what they did, and didn't really replace him with anyone. They're also, I mean, clearly, if they acquire Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell, this changes a lot. But as they are currently constituted, I would probably put them fourth in the East. And if Brooklyn stays together, talent wise, I would probably put them fifth in the East. Um, I guess first, I'll
But
let you react to
when
that.
has talent ever been the decider for Miami? I guess since the Miami thrice.
This is true. This is why I gave them the benefit of the doubt and put them
Yeah.
in the maybes.
Yeah. I think that they've earned more than the maybe. I don't know. They don't have Memphis's talent, but it's really hard to imagine the Heat not pushing a really good team to 7 games in the second round or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, who's your guy here? Because I already have 3 guys off the top of my head that like I think you can make a really strong argument for being the swinger.
Yeah. I had two. I couldn't decide between the two of them. Tyler Hero is probably the most obvious one because he's their sort of youngest prospect with the largest like growth plate. You can sort of see him improving the most if he kind of improves his efficiency, improves his playmaking, becomes less of an absolute turnstile on defense, and
Becomes a better husband. Yeah.
he dealt with injuries a lot during last year's playoffs, and he wasn't there sort of to finish the end of that Celtics series. So I think he really needs to get up to like real fringe all-star status. Although he got some like all-star votes this year, I thought that was a little that was a lot of that was because of guys that were injured, I think, and also just this weird like, oh, we got to put someone from the winning team, which I think is generally a bad way to pick all-stars. But
Yeah.
if he can get up to, strong efficiency. One problem with him is his 2-point percentage has been under 50% for his career. So it'd be huge for his scoring game to take that up a notch. And if he can be like a real, maybe not elite scorer, but a high level scoring option to complement Jimmy Butler, who has to shoulder so much of the offensive load in the playoffs, that I think can kind of boost them. And then another guy who I thought about was Victor Oladipo, who has flashed all-star status in the past and is just coming off a number of really debilitating injuries. And as a defender, looked really strong last year, but the offensive game has definitely taken a while to come back. Like his shooting percentages are just atrocious from last year's playoffs. 27% on threes in the playoffs, 45% on twos, 37% overall. So if he can regain some of his offensive game, that definitely raises their ceiling.
It's funny just like hearing the names out loud. You sort of talked me off the ledge with Miami. Suddenly I'm like put Memphis in a tier above them because because they don't have that flash, that like pop, at least on offense, to hang with some of the higher powered teams in the league. But back to Hero, I think I've been thinking a lot about how he's in a pretty awkward spot as an asset right now in the league, where like the Heat want to believe that he can be the poster boy in a package for a Mitchell or a Durant, when obviously those teams are not going to see him as enough because he hasn't really developed the last couple of years, like at least the Heat hoped he would after that bubble playoff run. And I think one of the things that has really become clear to me the last few weeks of Durant trade talks, of Mitchell trade talks, is like, if you have one of these stars and you're trading for a mega package, you either want all the picks or you want a guy who hasn't shown you yet that he can't be the one on a really competitive team. And so like you can say like, yeah, Scotty Barnes hasn't really done anything yet. He was an awesome rookie, but like he's not as good as Jaylen Brown. And like it would be great if Scotty Barnes ends up as good as Jaylen Brown. But Jaylen Brown has kind of shown us like there's a like really high likelihood he is a number 2 on an amazing team. It's hard to see him scaling up to number 1. The ball handling, he's better as an ancillary attacker. Like Scotty just has shown us a million things, and he hasn't, and we have no proof that he can't be that guy. Guys like Mobley, Anthony Edwards, like you got to take a chance on the guys that that just we can't write them off yet as potential leaders on a really, really strong team. And Tyler Hero is 100% proven that he can't be that guy. And his ceiling isn't anywhere near those names that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think for that reason, like the Heat just need him to rebound and to get back to, I think, what they thought he was going to be a year or two ago, because he just wasn't much of a threat in the playoffs this year after having a really good regular season. And it's hard to see him being a major rim threat because he's sort of an average athlete. not super long. He's gonna have to just be like a lights out shooter, savvy mid-range guy. Make all the free throws he gets because there won't be many of them. He's gonna have to move really well off the ball and kind of just be like a smart Steph Curry like defender because he's been a real minus on that end and he's been called out by the front office for it because they value that end so much and that the toughness that he doesn't really bring to that side of the floor. Point being, yeah, like I think like they're not gonna be able to trade Tyler Herro for the guy that they want that will kind of like get them into firmly into that tier above the maybes.
Yeah.
And for that reason, like they just better hope that like his intangibles, which by all accounts are really good, like kind of vault him into the next tier of guys that he hasn't been quite able to break through.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why Miami and Memphis are in the maybes, because I don't know. I don't feel particularly good about either of those swings
Yeah,
going their way, at least next season. Maybe, I mean, down the line for Memphis, sure, but next season, I don't really see it. And I'd probably rank them 9th and 10th in my power rankings of title contenders for next year based on
yeah.
that.
Jimmy's a year older. I don't know what he is now. Is he going to be 33 this year or something like that? Bam has stalled as an offensive player. I feel like just like he's still elite defensively, but can he be your second best offensive guy if your first is Jimmy, who's amazing, but maybe he's not Luka.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of questions there. I see how you got them in the maybes. All right, let's
Get to the
get to
real
the
ones.
let's get to the bona fides. Who's the
Yes.
last team in your contender tier?
Okay, we can just quickly touch on Phoenix. They might not be the last team in my contender tier, but I think they are the ultimate like no swinger team. They're just really high floor. I think relatively low ceiling for a title contender. You kind of know what you're going to get from everyone. Like I don't see Devin Booker making the jump from like a top 15 player to like a true top 6 or 7 player. Like that just doesn't seem likely to me. Chris Paul is still dealing with aging, although he seems, at least in the regular season, to be able to push that off every year. DeAndre Ayton, that whole situation is kind of weird. Obviously, if they trade for Kevin Durant, this is all different, but that seems increasingly unlikely. So
Not
I put
happening.
I put nobody for title swingers for Phoenix. But I think you still have to give them the respect of like an actual title contender, since they did win 60 games last year. They've got the same team. They were kind of everyone's favorite going into the playoffs, and just some whatever weird behind the scenes stuff, as well as Luka Doncic's individual brilliance, led to them just crumbling. So
Yeah.
yeah, do you have anything on them? We can just be really quick
Maybe
on them.
maybe this might be a cop out, but I like for me the swing with them is like the chemistry, the interpersonal situation. How do you bounce back from that embarrassing night on a global stage? Is that going to break them? Are they going to come back behind really strong veteran leadership and mental toughness and prove that that was like just a nightmare that is behind them? Um, or are they gonna be like sort of like the Blake Griffin CP Clippers, like where it's just like
Yeah.
there's been trauma and there's no getting past it, even though they're really talented.
And I mean, they
So
were making
yeah,
comparisons. I don't know if they themselves were making comparisons, but I was hearing comparisons of like 2014 Spurs with how like well their machine was running, and they had, it wasn't just the debilitating loss they had in Game 7 last year, blowing the 2-0 lead in the finals against the Bucks and losing 2 of those games kind of at the last second, just on like Herculean plays from Giannis and Drew Holiday. That was like a huge gut punch. And then to come back with the focus to like win all those games in the regular season, seemed like they had it figured out, and then just completely blow it against a Dallas team that really I don't think is like, it probably didn't have the talent of like a legit title contender. So
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, they had me picking Dallas in 7 in the Western Conference Finals.
yeah,
That's how good I thought Phoenix was.
yeah. And then you saw
And
Golden State just like,
Luca snatched their souls, and then the Warriors made them look young and not ready.
yeah, yeah. They got 3-0 on them, didn't they?
Yeah. So yeah, man. I think that's kind of the swing. Is it Monty Williams? It's just like what does that trauma do to this team? Does it propel them? Are they now stunted? Because last year was the year. And
Yeah.
I guess, we can talk about Bridges because Luka, like he does with everybody, made Bridges look like, a non all NBA defender in
Yeah.
that series. That's just what Luka does. And so
Yeah.
obviously people are going to be pretty harsh with Bridges. Um, can he give them more on offense? Can he, look like a defensive player of the year candidate against pretty much anyone else? Can he continue to get better? Maybe Aiton,
Yeah. I was gonna
like
say,
because he's saying to the press that he's the kind of like the past is behind them and he's excited to be there. But is he, or is that what his agent's telling him to say? Does he just
yeah.
want peace before he's on the move once he's eligible to be traded? Yeah, a lot of
Yeah. I was
questions
gonna
for
say
Phoenix.
maybe the swing guy is Aiton if he like sort of elevates his scoring game and sort
Yeah,
of becomes more aggressive, but it just doesn't seem like that's the way they want to play. Like it doesn't seem like they want to throw the ball into him 10
yeah,
times a game. Um, and that's I think where a lot of that friction seems to, or at least what's reported as friction seems to come from. So yeah, I'm sorry, Phoenix. I see you. I think you'll be a very good regular season team. You'll probably be a top 4 seed again, but said for that reason, and with the success you've had in the past, I'm going to put them as a legit contender. But I think that while their floor is very high, their ceiling is relatively low.
yeah.
All right, on to the more exciting ones. Actually, one that's less exciting, I think, is the Clippers. I don't think they really have a title swinger. It's just, is Kawhi healthy or not? Because if Kawhi's healthy, he is absolutely a number one on a championship team. He can carry you there. He's done it before. And they're so deep. Like if one of their guys in their rotation doesn't hit, they have another guy ready to step in. Like if Covington's bad, they have Powell and Marcus Morris ready to step in, or Kennard, Batum, all these interchangeable parts. It's really just going to come down to if Kawhi's healthy or not.
Yep. We can talk about John Wall. We can talk about like Terrence Mann taking a step, but you're right. Yeah. If Kawhi's Kawhi, they're without a doubt a contender. So I
All right,
like that take.
let's get to the actually interesting ones. I'm going to start with the guy who made me think of this exercise in the first place, which is Michael Porter
Woo!
Jr. Michael Porter Jr.
Okay.
He, I think, might be the ultimate swing guy over the next several years in the NBA. I believe Zach Lowe has referred to him as one of the most important players in the NBA.
Especially with the emergence of monkeypox. If there's another vaccination cycle, that man will not be allowed to play basketball games.
So the Denver Nuggets I'm certainly going to have my eye on them next year and going to be wanting to watch as many games as possible. They've got Jamal Murray coming back, and I am factoring in that I expect him to mostly be himself after maybe an adjustment period at the beginning of the year. ACLs now with modern medicine are, people come back and are pretty much the same player afterwards, as long as it's one injury. So Michael Porter Jr., basically the question is he still on a star track? In the 2020-2021 season, he was an absolutely elite shooter. He wasn't just a good shooter. He was 44.5% from three on high volume, true shooting of 66%, which is 10 points above league average, 63% on twos. Like there's nothing on offense where he's not efficient, and elite doesn't have elite efficiency except maybe turnovers. But as a scorer, he can just cut, spot up, and sleepwalk his way otherwise into
Offensive
20
rebound.
points. Offensive rebound, everything. And he's a perfect fit with Jokic for that reason. And in the brief glimpse we saw of Murray, Porter, Jokic, and Aaron Gordon when they traded for him, they were an absolutely blistering team. Since then, Jokic, I think, has gotten significantly better, particularly as a defender and at hunting his own shot. And they've added other pieces from KCP, who's going to help their defense. Bruce Brown is going to help their defense and their bench. And I think it's all going to come down to if Michael Porter Jr. is healthy or not. Because if he is healthy and resumes his high efficiency, 3-point shooting, cutting, general offensive dynamism,
Yeah, they're going to outscore everyone.
they're probably, I think they'll have the best offense in the league. And if, as long as their defense is, passable, which with the additions of KCP and Brown, as well with Jokic's improvements, should help that. This team's going to be really good. And last time we saw those three guys together, they beat the Clippers and they went to the conference finals where they lost to the Lakers in a somewhat competitive series. So
yeah, I'll never forget because I dove really deep on the 2018 draft. You know, I remember talking to you before. Did the Knicks have 9? Is when they took Mr. Knox?
That is correct.
I remember, obviously, like, nobody hated the Knox pick at the time, but we don't need to open up that can of worms. I remember you saying, you know, if they take Michael Porter, I can live with it because he is who we thought he was. He was the best player in his high school class, talent off the charts, like T-Mac, shot making ability. Oh, maybe that's disrespectful, but he's a crazy scorer. And you know, he goes 14 just because the X-rays are scary and we don't know if his body can hold up. But you know, he would have been a good Nick. All right. Yeah. I have nothing to add on the Nuggets. Who you got next?
Next, I have Brooklyn, who might be the ultimate ceiling basement team in the league because they might have a big 1 of Ben Simmons next year, or they might have a big 3 of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons. And
the ceiling is the floor.
Exactly. This is like the Grand Canyon of ceiling basements. So, and my guy for them, it's fairly obvious, but it's Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
All the noise has been about Brooklyn blowing up, but if they don't, they do actually have kind of a great looking team on paper between Ben Simmons, who didn't play at all last year, Joe Harris, who barely played, like a lineup of Kyrie, Seth Curry, Joe Harris, Ben Simmons, and Kevin Durant is like kind of pretty crazy. That's 4 elite 3-point shooters with Simmons, who is elite at finding 3-point shooters and is an elite defender himself. Certainly a small backcourt between Kyrie and Curry, but you have to think that the sort of 3-point shooting there would make up for some of the deficiencies on the defensive end. And if he just kind of embraces like the things that he's good at, defending the other team's best player, running in transition, finding shooters, finishing, he can fit perfectly. And if he doesn't, then they'll probably blow up.
Yeah. And okay, I totally agree on Simmons. He's the first name for sure. Just want to throw some Cam Thomas love out there.
Mm-hmm.
I said in our flag planting episode that I don't expect anything to happen. I actually think somehow we're going to start this season with Kyrie and KD on the Nets. So far so good. If I'm wrong and they're somehow able to get Kyrie for anything, whether it's the Lakers or somewhere else that hasn't emerged yet as a rumor, they're going to need some guard scoring and some pop, at least off the bench. And I still think Cam Thomas is going to average 18 to 20 points at some time in this league. I just like absolutely love the way he attacks the rim. I like his strength and his just general shot making fire. So Cam Thomas, if we get to the point where Ben Simmons is an asset, a playoff asset, hard to believe, but it could happen, and the Nets are in the mix, I think Cam Thomas could become a Poole-esque scoring swing guy for the Nets. And that is definitely not super likely, but I just want to plant it here, okay?
Okay. Yeah, just don't ask him about passing.
All right. Neither of us pays for Zoom Plus, whatever the premium service is called. So we are back from our 40-minute cutoff. We just did the Nets. Mostly Ben Simmons, a tiny sprinkling of Cam Thomas BS on my part. Who's after the Nets? Because it's no fun talking about the Nets.
Yeah. We talked about Miami and how losing PJ Tucker could be a big blow for them. And I think he is the swing piece in Philadelphia. And I think the Sixers are a true title contender next year. When we did our exercise last playoffs, going through what we called the roll call, all the role players on the teams in the second round, I think we had Philly at the bottom pretty decisively. They just didn't have a functional supporting cast last year. And between the additions of Melton, Daniel House, and I think most importantly, PJ Tucker, they should be able to paper over some of those holes where you don't have, 8th and 9th men trying to masquerade as 5th and 6th men. And I mean, PJ Tucker, all he's done the past few years is bounce around from conference finals team to finals team to conference finals team. He is proven to be impactful in the playoffs, a career 36.5% 3-point shooter. Last year, 41.5%. The year before that, 33%. So a little bit depends on where he's going to fall in that range. But providing a real 3-and-D player, a two-way player in their starting lineup, and perhaps even being able to play some backup center, which historically has been just a train wreck for the Sixers whenever Embiid goes off the floor. So if he can paper over some of those holes and sort of instill a general sense of competitiveness and fire in that team, I mean, Embiid's good enough that he should be able to get you through the playoffs if he can just stay healthy. So
this is the first one that feels like the wrong choice for me.
Yeah.
And whatever, I can give you the boring. PJ Tucker's 37, turns 38 on Cinco de Mayo of 2023. And like, if he's your swing guy, then I think that maybe you've got some problems. He's great. But the way that you could be right is that, like, he changes the culture of this team that just looked soft and very un-Miami-ish in the playoffs last year. And as Miami kind of exposed their lack of fight, at least. And so it's like the swing guy has to be, for me, like Harden or Maxey, who could become an all-star. Like, he has that amount of talent, and Harden, who could become an all-star in the playoffs, because I don't think he's been one in a very long time. Harden is the most obvious one for me, just because, okay, he took less money, but it won't matter unless he plays like he should in the playoffs, and unless he is willing to play hard even when he's having one of his 2 for 13s and create for others. Is he going to get some pop back? Is he going to have some pep in his step this year, or is he just on an athletic decline?
Yeah.
Just like you said about Kawhi on the Clippers. Like, yes, on the Clippers, we could have talked about Batum. We could have talked about Terrence Mann. We could have talked about John Wall. But it's the stars that dictate these playoff runs 99% of the time. And so for that reason, what James Harden are we getting? That's the swing that I'm most focused on in Philadelphia.
That's fair. Honestly, the thing I'm most excited about with PJ Tucker is someone who's a historic Sixers apologist and just loves to fall in love with the Sixers every season. I do think the idea of him playing backup 5 could be really big for them. Everyone sort of cites that Toronto series a few years ago where Embiid didn't even play that well. He was dealing with some sort of illness or injury, but they were plus a decisive amount, like 40 or something, with him on the court, and then minus like 60 in the, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was plus a lot in the minutes he was on the court, and then minus by slightly more in the minutes that he was off the court. So if they can sort of create some weird Harden ball second unit when Embiid is off the court that has Tucker at center and just 5 guys spaced out, maybe that can help offset the disaster minutes, which are usually there. But I mean, I agree, Harden's probably the obvious choice, and it seems unrealistic to think he can return to MVP form, but if he can just be like, a clear top 15 to 20 player, which would be a huge improvement from what he was for a lot of last year, then certainly that helps nudge them up closer to real title contention.
Yeah. Says a lot about PJ Tucker's will and modern sports medicine that he's in the conversation here at 37, a 6'5" perspective backup center for a contender. Okay.
Next, I've got the runner-ups from this year, the Boston Celtics. And I think it's Malcolm Brogdon, and it's pretty much all health dependent because he has not played more than 64 games in a season since his rookie year. These are his games played after he played 75 games his rookie year. Since then, he's played 48, 64, 54, 56, and 36 out of 82. So
yeah, in the same vein as MPJ, another guy who had supposedly terrifying pre-draft medicals. He doesn't have MPJ's talent, but he had the same scary medical report going into his draft. And Yeah, and it's made a lot of sense the last few years. When he's on the floor, he's great.
Yeah,
Really good two-way player. You can see how he fits into that thick 6'5", 6'6" Celtics mold. And if he's healthy, like it's really easy to imagine him putting them over the top because they're already there. Okay. Agree on Brogdon, but can we talk about Jaylen Brown?
There's
Because
one more thing on Brogdon, because I think he can sort of be like you saw how well Derek White fit into their team when he went
yeah,
there, and he can kind of be like a supercharged version of Derek White. And basically, the only thing the Celtics were missing last year was or were decision making, like having another reliable playmaker, limiting turnovers, and having a more reliable true 8-man rotation rather than kind of a shaky 6 or 7, was what they had by the end of the playoffs.
yeah,
And he just slots in immediately as like a very competent,
yeah.
high end rotation guy, kind of stabilizing force, because they don't really have a true point guard on their roster. Apologies to Marcus Smart. And yeah, if he's healthy, he can fill all those holes for sure. But yeah, Jaylen Brown, go.
No disagreement on Brogdon. Like healthy Malcolm Brogdon fits on 30 NBA teams because he's good on ball, good off ball, strong defender at a few positions. But Jaylen Brown, quickly. I don't know what the hell that the Celtics are doing. I cannot believe that they finally found some harmony, some stability with that young core. And just like I think they blew everything up just by making like one call or by letting it leak that they made an offer.
Yeah.
I can't believe they did it. Not because it isn't worth thinking about trading for Kevin Durant, but I would never do it if I were Boston. Unless you have real intel that Jaylen Brown like wants to be the guy or wants to get out of Boston because he's been dangled in trade talks seemingly his whole career.
Right.
Maybe Boston knows that he wants out at the end of this like contract that he has a couple more years left on because he's already like entering the extension now.
Yeah.
But man, like he's the swing guy in the sense that like I would completely understand if he's like, fuck this team, man. Like I was the best player, maybe not, but I was the best player on our playoff run.
I think he was the best player in the finals
He was
on that team.
best player in the finals. I finally sort of like proved myself as an all-star, bona fide, two-way playoff wing. And I'm still in talks for like the latest disgruntled superstar. So I don't know. They might have screwed with the zen that they seem to have found late in this
Yeah.
in the past season. And I don't know. I don't know. It's if because I don't think they're gonna trade for Kevin Durant. It's just like hard for me to get there psychologically. And so the
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown's going back to Boston and he's feeling disrespected. And I
Yeah.
don't know what that'll mean for I don't know what it'll mean for their team.
Yeah. Unless they can convince him that like the Nets leaked it and we were never actually seriously thinking about trading you or whatever. But I must say, as a Knicks fan, it made me smile a little bit when I was like, oh, could this Kevin Durant thing blow up both the Nets and the Celtics? That would be kind of a nice outcome for me.
Yeah, I just like I'm not even sure I would trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant straight up. Maybe it's because KD has all the years left, but like I can't get those images of round one this year out of my head. I don't care that KD had no help. He quit on that team in round one.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I just think that any Jaylen Brown for KD trade, the Celtics would be losing, and they might have lost a trade that didn't even happen now by pissing off a guy who played his tail off for them all year, and like the city has embraced, and yeah, that'll be interesting to follow. Okay, we
Yeah.
did Boston.
I'd just like to get it on the record that I probably would still trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant straight up, but we can do a full Kevin Durant discussion
Yes,
whenever we get to my
it
player
really
rankings.
comes down to like, do you think that Jaylen Brown is re-signing? But yeah, on the same contract, I think I'd rather have Jaylen Brown because like people are just penciling in KD as like a top 5 player in the league for the next couple of years. He's 34.
Yeah,
Not
but I
like
mean,
most guys are not LeBron James. Like there's a good chance that KD with his injury history, I don't know. I don't want to look like an idiot again because I was so worried about him post Achilles and he came back and lit
yeah,
shit up and was the best player in a series with Giannis. So I don't want to get too crazy, but I just can't believe some of the packages I hear, KD is I guess is demanding from other teams, or the Nets are demanding for KD. And I guess I just need to remind myself that he's a top 10, top 12 player ever, and he has 4 more years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And we will certainly be doing more Kevin Durant talk as the offseason goes on. But all right, I've got two teams left for title swingers. And I'm going to start with the less interesting one, which is Milwaukee. A large part of them, I think, is health. Because I think if Chris Middleton was healthy, they would have made the finals last year and quite possibly would have won. But picking one guy, I do think Joe Ingles could be kind of a swing guy for them if he can just get healthy off of that ACL, which at his age is no guarantee. I think a big sort of underrated part of them losing to Boston last year was that they had no lineup flexibility. Because they let PJ Tucker go, who has come up a lot in this discussion, they were forced to go big, like no matter what. They had to have one of Lopez or Bobby Portis on the court at all times, which, contrasting with their title run, they were closing finals games with Giannis at center and PJ Tucker at the 4. And that's just not a look that they had last year. Now, Ingles is a very different player from PJ Tucker. I'm not sure if he can play the 4 next to Giannis, but he at least gives them like another sort of interchangeable wing and another ball handler, playmaker, and shooter to just kind of give Bud more options to play around with when it comes to lineups, just because I felt like they really got boxed in last playoffs in a way that like a title contender, I think, should have a little bit more flexibility than that. So I'm thinking that if Ingles is healthy, he can help with that, and his shooting and playmaking at the very least will give them sort of another look that they haven't had, and they won't be relying on Grayson Allen to make corner threes. They really struggled to shoot around Giannis in that Boston series. So
yeah.
My
only concern would be that, like, at the end of his stint in Utah, Ingles seemed to age out a little bit out of that demanding two-way role, like creating a lot for them on offense, kind of filling some of the lack of point guard they had while he was there. And then he just had a really rough injury. So hopefully, like, with smaller responsibilities in Milwaukee, he can be that like really smart two-way contributor. I don't have any qualms with that pick. I think there's so much stability in Milwaukee. Like, can Wes Matthews be the same defender he was in the playoffs for them last year? But there are a lot of sure things on this team, and I think that's why it'll be like you can sleep well picking Milwaukee to go deep into the playoffs again. They have the best player in the league, and a lot of guys that have pulled up their big boy pants in the playoffs and instilled a lot of confidence in Bud.
Yeah, I mean, for his basement, I said he might just not be a valuable NBA player anymore as someone with already questionable athleticism coming off an ACL at age 34. But yeah, if I had to pick someone, I would pick him.
Okay.
All right. My last title swinger for the Golden State Warriors, which I think is counting the two maybes, the 10th and final team that I think can win the NBA championship next year.
All right. Let's hear it. I'm thinking this guy's going to be under 23.
No, I think I might have gone disappointingly obvious for this one, but I went with Klay Thompson.
Okay, yeah, that was the other one.
Because obviously they can win the title with him playing at the level he played at last season because they did it. But if he's going to be at that level, I think they are sort of in the pack with the Clippers and the Nuggets and the Celtics and the Bucks as sort of like those high-level title contenders, but by no means like a clear favorite. However, if he can get back to some version of what he was before his injuries, even if he's not all the way to like a top 25 player, top 20 player, if he's just like a clear top 40 player or even top 30 player, that I think vaults them. And if he can regain consistency more, because last year he would so often go from shooting like 2 of 13 from 3 in one game, or for a few game stretch, kind of averaging around that, and then going up to like 10 of 14 or 7 of 11. He just had these wild swings. So if he can get a little bit more consistency and get back to that level, then I think they become a clear favorite with the depth that they have, as opposed to just sort of being in the pack as I see them right now, in the pack of contenders.
I did think that, like, athletically, Klay looked better as the playoffs went on. I think that's really promising because like you're like, if your positive self-talk here is like, he's on his way back. He's on an upward trend. He's not really old yet. Like he's slowly getting back from a couple really traumatic injuries. Um, I think that I like the Clay pick. I think you could also go with sort of like a three-headed youngster package of Wiseman, Moody, Kuminga. Like just one of them become like a key rotation guy, because I think there's a
Mhm.
good chance two of them do this year. All three of those guys are really talented, and like the franchise seems to love all of them. Um, this has to be the year that they deploy Kuminga as like, like guard someone who's really athletic, and then like cut and dunk and rebound and do all the nitty gritty things on offense that are more finessey offensive stars don't do as much. And then for Moody, like he just seems to have some 3-and-D pop. He doesn't need to create much off the dribble. Just make your threes and play some stout defense. Wiseman, I feel like the marginal gain is a little bit less there
Yeah.
because Looney has become so important to this team and he's such a smart post defender. They don't need Wiseman, but hell, a couple of years ago, Wiseman was seen as like sort of a DeAndre Jordan floor with
Right.
his crazy frame and athleticism and hands and the lob threat, the way he runs the floor. So, like, yeah, can one of those three youngsters that they see as like sort of their future core and Poole, can one of those guys just like take a massive step? Because if those are like their free agent signings, obviously they got DiVincenzo. We should mention that name because he's one of my favorite players in the league. And Zach Lowe's talked a lot about how disgustingly well he's going to fit in with that free flowing offense.
Yeah.
Um, they have a lot of guys that didn't help them win last year's title that are ready to play big minutes this year. And
Yep.
that's really scary. And that's why I can't argue with you having him at number one.
Yeah. And then
DiVincenzo, Kuminga, Moody, Wiseman. Like a couple of those guys are going to be awesome for them this year.
mhm. And they just picked up Jermichael Green on a minimum deal. Like he can slide in and play some 4 or 5 for them, with like another stretch
Yeah,
option. Like
they're a better
they have a lot of
roster.
guys.
They are a
Yeah.
bet. They are definitely a better roster, and like Steph could even take like a 2% step down, and they still might be a better team because they got so they got so much better this year. I feel like this is an off season where their roll call took real steps.
Yeah.
I really hope DiVincenzo can stay healthy on this team because yeah, he is a seamless fit.
Yeah, a couple more points on Clay. I think with some of the dynamic offenses in the West, it'll certainly be helpful if he can get back to close to that sort of really high level defense.
Yeah.
And when you think about playing a team like the Clippers, you're going to need interchangeable wings to throw at Kawhi and PG, and having someone beyond that you can really trust beyond just Wiggins and Draymond to also be able to throw at them with Clay is good. If you think about playing the Grizzlies, if he can sort of deal with Jaw a little bit because they're guard defenders, especially without Gary Payton,
Yeah.
aren't quite where they were before. And then also, if he's better on D, I think that allows them to experiment more with the vaunted death pool lineup, which was the talk of the NBA for about 4 playoff games before it started getting exposed on defense a lot because Poole and Clay weren't quite at the level that they needed to be. But if he can get back to like a higher level, then maybe that allows them to experiment more where they only really have one weak link in that lineup as opposed to 2.
Yeah. And also like Poole's really young and they have amazing defensive development on that team. Like maybe Poole can get to just below average or average.
Yep.
He's a fine athlete. He's not small. There's no reason that Poole should be a defensive disaster. Like that's all just like know-how, effort. So yeah, maybe Poole gets to a point where Kerr can feel okay about him on an island with a decent perimeter score.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Max, for carrying the show. Our hope is to continue to do some fun off-season stuff since we love like these big picture questions. And like Max said at the start, he's been working on his like top 50 list, which he does in his mom's basement every summer.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. And see you next time.